There was a time when Umar Ibn Al-Khattab radiallahu anhu was one of the greatest enemies of Islam, a man who wanted to destroy the Quran, a man who carried his sword to kill the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a man who swore that he would end Islam forever, but Allah had written something different for him. A single moment, a single verse, changed his heart forever. This is the story of how the Quran transformed the fiercest enemy of Islam into its greatest defender. And today, we must ask ourselves, when was the last time the Quran moved our hearts like this? The streets of Makkah trembled as Umar Ibn Al-Khattab radiallahu anhu walked through them. His mission? Kill the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and end Islam forever. With his sword in hand, he marched towards Dar al-Arqam, where the Muslims were gathered. But on the way, someone stopped him. Before you kill Muhammad, shouldn't you deal with your own sister first? Your sister Fatima has accepted Islam. Fury filled his heart. His own blood had betrayed him. Blind with rage, he turned direction and stormed into his sister's house. Inside, his sister Fatima and her husband were sitting, reciting Surah Taha from a manuscript. The words of Allah filled the room. Umar burst through the door. His eyes burned with anger. "What are you reading?" His sister tried to hide the manuscript, but he grabbed her and slapped her across the face. She fell to the ground, bleeding. But instead of fear, she held the Quran close to her heart. She looked at him and said, "You can hurt me, but you cannot remove the truth from my heart." At that moment, something in Umar's heart shook. He had seen his sister cry before, but never like this. She was not crying out of pain. She was crying because he had rejected the truth. For the first time, his anger faded, and curiosity took over. He turned his eyes to the manuscript she was hiding. "Let me see what you are reading." His sister hesitated. "You are impure," she said. "You must wash yourself before touching the Quran." Umar, the warrior, the enemy of Islam, went and purified himself. Then he picked up the parchment.
طه ما أنزلنا عليك القرآن لتشقى إلا تذكرة لمن يخشى.
Taha, we have not sent down the Quran to distress you, but as a reminder for those who fear Allah. Tears filled his eyes. This is not the word of man. His heart trembled, his hands shook. And at that moment, his soul knew the truth. He dropped his sword. Instead of killing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he ran to him, crying, "Ya RasulAllah, I have come to accept Islam." The Quran changed the heart of a man who wanted to destroy Islam and turned him into its greatest defender. The Quran was not just a book for the Sahaba. It transformed their lives. It guided them from darkness to light. It made warriors weep and kings bow down. Bilal radiallahu anhu was tortured for saying Ahad, Ahad, but the Quran gave him strength. Salman al-Farsi radiallahu anhu traveled across the world searching for truth and found it in the Quran. Jafar ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu stood before the king of Abyssinia and recited Surah Maryam. And the king cried, "This book changed the greatest men in history. But what about us? When was the last time the Quran moved our hearts like this?" Today, the Quran is in our homes. But is it in our hearts? We read messages on our phones every day. But how often do we read the message from Allah? We memorize song lyrics, but do we memorize the words that lead to Jannah? We say we are Muslim, but do we let the Quran transform us like it transformed Umar? Then the messenger will say, "O my Lord, my people have abandoned this Quran." Will the Prophet ﷺ say this about us? The Quran is not just a book. It is a miracle. It is a guide. It is the key to Jannah, but only if we open it. Share this video and remind others about the power of the Quran. Subscribe for more inspiring Islamic stories. May Allah make us people of the Quran. Ameen.